Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of PhotoBiz Live. This is Danny from the PhotoBiz team, and today we're going to be joined by Jeff P. from our Passionate Support team, and he is going to be going over some advanced SEO tips for you. So if you are joining us in today's webinar, we are going to be talking about a little bit more advanced SEO. And so we're kind of going to skip some of the basic things about search engine optimization and just assume that everyone's there. But the way that this webinar is guided today, even if you're just a beginner or novice, this should definitely still make sense to you and help you out. Our goal here with today's webinar is really to just show you the different tools that you can use inside of Google's free webmaster tools and analytics and how they're able to help you understand how traffic is coming to your website, how long it's visiting your website, how traffic's getting there, and really, how you can improve that. So as everybody knows, there is unfortunately no magic wand or switch for SEO, and really it does take time. And the best advice that I can give personally is, don't lose too much sleep over it. And if you work hard and you do the right things and you see how people are trending to your website, and you do the other things that can help drive in traffic to your site, you're bound to get good results. So you just got to stick with it, and that's what Jeff is going to talk to you about today, some of those advanced tips that are going to help out with your search engine optimization. Then later in the webinar, actually, we'll be talking a little bit about social media in regards to search engine optimization, and I will be talking to you guys again about that. So again, I do the social media service here, and Jeff has done many SEO services for our clients here at PhotoBiz and has a great deal of knowledge on this subject. So I'm excited to see so many of you join us today, and we're going to go ahead and jump right into today's webinar. If at any point during the webinar you have any kind of difficulty hearing myself or Jeff, just shoot us over a message in the chat tool area, and that will actually come right up on our screen, and we can do our best to troubleshoot any kind of issues that you might have going on. Now, we also are recording this webinar right now, so it will be available on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/PhotoBiz. And if you check that out, you can view all of our previously recorded webinars, and you can subscribe to our channel while you're there. And if you guys are on Twitter, we do have a hashtag that we use. It is hashtag PhotoBizLive. So whether you're taking a photo of your monitor right now showing that you're in a webinar getting your education on, or you are just wanting to ask a question associated with today's webinar, just use that hashtag so we can find it nice and easy. Again, that's hashtag PhotoBizLive. All right, well, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Jeff.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak to you a little bit more about SEO of those that I may have spoken with in the past. SEO is something that I do have a bit of passion about, primarily because I think it relates to not only what you're doing in the physical sense as far as your business is concerned, but some of the online marketing strategies that are associated with that. And the simplest means of expressing or explaining how SEO is really working for you is it's basically an online marketing tool. So a lot of the questions that come about with SEO, particularly with the service, is do you have a concrete online marketing plan? And for most small businesses, you're too busy trying to operate that business, the core fundamental of that, whether you're a service provider or a photographer or a product provider, part of that struggle is I'm the provider, I'm the service renderer, I'm the accountant, I'm the marketer, and so on. And so a lot of things that are contained within SEO are really more a strategy of using those components or those things that can collectively work to helping you foster or at least develop your online marketing plan. And then more importantly, how to maintain that. And then, of course, improve it as your business model and your business itself matures. So part of what we wanted to cover was the time frames, meta versus content, and then the root domain, and then organic versus pay-per-click. These are typically the topics that are presented to us as primary areas of concern, especially for those that are embarking upon their initial efforts, with SEO. And it can be kind of tricky, so we always recommend that clients call us at least for some initial guidance. And then again, of those that don't necessarily have the time or the wherewithal to do the necessary research in order to place, the appropriate milestones in place in order to have effective SEO right out of the gate. I highly recommend, the SEO service. In relation to time frames, when you set out on your SEO plan, as I call it, the idea is you do want to look at this as an investment. It's no different than you buying a piece of equipment or investing in the infrastructure aspect of your business. As Danny may have alluded to, there's no silver bullet that's going to take you to page one. I mean, there are some means that you can use, like Google AdWords or campaigns to help promote that, but it's not something that we necessarily recommend, at least not initially, because you always want to ensure that the foothold that you place within your search engine optimization or your ranking is based upon what you do from an organic standpoint. So the time frame, again, is just a natural investment or a decision of making that investment, which is going to be time, and that it's not necessarily something that's going to happen overnight. In addition to that, you're also talking about the meta versus content. So the metadata that you have within the site and the content are to work collectively to your benefit. So it's ideal for you to put in information that you know is associated with your business, maybe part of those quote-unquote buzzwords to help promote your business or help promote you in association with that target demographic that you're going after. The root domain, of course, is going to be specifically your domain name. So how are you promoting that domain name, as well as the business name in and of itself? And then the aspect, again, of organic versus pay-per-click. And there are a lot of different philosophies about that. I wouldn't necessarily say that one is better than the other, but we do have an approach that I think is integral to where you start out initially. So the first thing that we always impart upon clients when they're starting out with the whole SEO effort and trying to navigate the landscape is to understand that a lot of what Google makes available to you is free. It's open source, and it's there really to use as a vehicle, a direct vehicle to get in communication with Google. Almost every single person that we've talked to about SEO is primarily interested in making that impact with Google specifically. There are other search engines out there, Bing and Yahoo, that also kind of play a role in the SEO, but primarily the one that people are interested in is Google. Google has a wonderful suite of tools that are available. Again, these are open source, so you can take advantage of utilizing these, and it's really just a matter of establishing a Google account or a Gmail account, whether that's going to be a business account or a personal account. I recommend a business account because you can associate your domain name with it. And like I said, in utilizing some of the Google Suite tools, like Google Webmaster Tools, Analytics, Google Places, etc., you're using it, again, as a direct means to promote your business to Google, but also feed them important information that you want in turn to have spit back out to the general public. And maybe spit was the wrong word. AdWords and the approach of AdWords, I think, is always worth the investment, at least from the initial standpoint. I mean, when you're talking about how do I go about determining the words that are going to make the best impact for my business and more closely aligning me with that target demographic, AdWords is a good place to start. I think it's a great opportunity for you to look at some of the keywords that you plan on utilizing with your overall approach, but also how effective are those words going to be within that target demographic, because it's not just you that's making the approach with your search engine optimization. It's all your competitors as well. So Webmaster Tools provides you a couple of core pieces of information, which I think really establishes that foothold that you make within the initial steps of making that approach to, page one, which is nirvana for everybody. So as far as the crawl errors are concerned, PhotoBiz has you covered from that perspective. Many of the products that we have already have the sitemap developed or embedded within the tool or within the product itself. So a lot of what we've done is we've created, a sitemap that basically can be submitted either through the control panel, but we also recommend coupling that effort with Google Webmaster Tools. Google Webmaster Tools is going to advise you on anything that may come up as a result of the submission of that sitemap. So if there are any associations with broken links or links that do not appear to be valid, it's going to notify you of that. An example would be of when folks submit their sitemap a bit prematurely. So in other words, they've submitted their sitemap, they don't necessarily have their domain name tied to the site, and they go in then and add the domain name to their site and resubmit the resubmit the sitemap again. So you will have some complications and errors that are associated with that initial submission versus that secondary submission. In addition to that, it's also going to provide you somewhat of a snapshot. So it's going to show you the queries that are associated with how many people are coming to the site, the click-through rate, which basically shows where people start out within your site as well as how they click through the site. So you're looking at individual page information for you to see where that traffic flow is actually going. And again, the queries really talk more about what's contained within those actual traffic sources. Again, the sitemap is something that's used as the primary tool to communicate with Google to tell them, this is what my website consists of. So not only are you talking about the actual structure of the site, whether it's Flash HTML or whether it's HTML5 or if it's in an HTML5 enhanced, which is going to be your biz site / store / blog site product. You're basically submitting that information to them to tell them, one, this is what my website consists of from a framework perspective, but more importantly for those areas within the site that have the metadata as well as the content that's on those individual pages. And I'm talking more specifically in relation to content as those information pages. So your About Us, pricing, session information, services, the type of products that you offer. All of those kind of frame the context of what Google would be interested in as your business and what, again, that you want them to pass back along to the general public. Updating your metadata is a means of course, alerting Google to the fact that your sitemap has been resubmitted for that very reason. Whether it's something that you're doing because you've removed a particular product or service from your business, or you're adding new products and services, or you've made a change. So maybe you've actually moved the business itself from one area to another area. And so you have kind of that overlap where you're still servicing clients in a particular area, but you're also trying to break into a new area. So part of that effort is going to require you to update the metadata to reflect that. Now, there can be a challenge with covering two markets. Now, if you've already established your foothold in that primary market where you started, it's probably pretty easy for you to maintain your foothold there, but making the transition and having a more prominent foothold in the newer area can be a bit of a challenge, and I think, again, it goes back to that investment in time before you actually see some of the results that you want. In relation to webmaster tools and, like I said, the vehicle of communicating what's within your website, metadata and content-wise, is the ability for you to submit to Google should they run into the situation where they've actually indexed a page which is basically an old page. So in other words, you established this page some time ago, you had submitted the sitemap, and for whatever reason you've determined I'm either going to turn this page off or it's really not part of my business anymore. There is a vehicle within Google Webmaster Tools that allows you to submit a request to them, and it's basically just that. It's a request. There's not necessarily any guarantee that Google will do anything because Google's Google. And so the approach really is, okay, if you're going to appeal to Google about URLs that are no longer valid, so let's say, for example, you had a website with another provider, and then you've moved, of course, your website to PhotoBiz, there may be those old URLs that are still out there for your old site, and depending upon how that was structured, those links may no longer be valid because although it utilizes your domain name, it may have a different URL path, as opposed to the URLs that are developed within our system, the template pays Virtue. So in some cases, if people are doing a search for you, they may find these old links for your About Us page or your gallery page or what have you, and when they click on it, they basically get the message that it's an invalid link. So you do have the means of being able to advise Google, hey, I need to have that particular page link removed, and I would probably do that through the help of PhotoBiz. I don't recommend that clients do that themselves at all. It can be very, very tricky, And the means is you're not trying to inundate Google with that information either. You have to be careful and timely about how often you submit the sitemap, but also when you're talking about those URL removals. So I can't stress strongly enough that whenever we run into a case like that, we always advise clients, allow us the opportunity to be able to go in and handle that for you. As far as the content keywords are concerned, it's really more a matter of ranking in the order of importance. Now, what I would say to that is utilize the keywords that you most strongly want to be represented by. And I think for most folks, it's usually a demographic and a type of service that you provide. So Oklahoma wedding photographer, New York City newborn photographer, things of that kind of sort. You may also be doing business in other areas and you're trying to make an impact in there, but just think about the keywords, particularly within the content sections. If you're spelling out who you are as a business, kind of keep those in, sort of a prioritized order. In other words, what you really want to place in the forefront of your business is the main component that you promote first as far as both your metadata and your content is concerned. And then, like I said, anything else that you have after the fact, you could, of course, also include, within the content and the keywords themselves. Analytics, similar to Google Webmaster Tools, is another open source product that you have available through Google. Generally speaking, when you have Google Webmaster Tools, it doesn't require you to do anything other than create an initial setup within Google Analytics. And the great thing about Google Analytics that Google has actually created a means for, and I guess it's been some time since this has been done, but you can actually have the data pulled from Google Analytics into Webmaster Tools and vice versa. So in essence, you're only really having to log into one platform in order to monitor what may be going on both sides of the equation. So if you're talking about, errors that may be associated with your sitemap, you can also get that within Google Analytics. But maybe perhaps if you're in the process of submitting your sitemap, maybe there's information in there that you also want to have pulled in from Google Analytics. So I can't stress enough the importance of Google Analytics, and I think primarily because it tells you in a snapshot who it is that you're making an impact with. So the question with SEO always is, well, how effective am I being, and how closely am I aligning myself with the people that I'm actually targeting? I think the other thing to keep in mind too is that what's that return on your investment? So that's kind of your ROI. So you're looking at, what am I doing as a means of promoting myself that's really helping me out? And of course, attributing itself to your bottom line. Learning as much as you can about your visitors, I think, is integral. So Google Analytics is going to tell you several things. It's going to tell you what that target demographic looks like. So if you're talking about location, you can find out, of course, by country, and then, of course, by state. And the drill down literally goes all the way down to the city or town level. And then from there, you can kind of see where your inquiries come from. And it's great because there's actually a map that will show you basically the number of clicks or visits that have originated, from those particular geographical areas. In addition to that, you can also find out what type of devices people are using to access your website. And this plays, I think, a critical role in determining what products are going to best serve your business, particularly that outreach aspect of your business. So if you're utilizing just a Flash site, as everybody knows, I think there's the question out there, can Google, index your site using Flash? They came out with a statement about 1.5 years ago that says that they can, but ideally with technology being what it is, and that, mobile devices are now the new desktop, having either an HTML classic mirror or taking advantage of the HTML5 portfolio site or the Biz site is really going to be the way to go, because again, you really can't determine, based on perhaps previous marketing, what people are using as the tools in order to reach your site. So having that overall accessibility is key. You can't get much better than HTML5, not only from the accessibility standpoint, but also it makes it easier for Google to index, and it kind of takes away, the confusion and the myth about, Flash versus HTML. As a result of what you find within the reporting structure of Google Analytics, it will kind of give you some indicators as to how you need to adjust your marketing. If you're using various tools like Twitter or Pinterest or Facebook or Google Places, you can kind of adjust your approach with that to basically provide more information to you as far as how to more actively target those areas. Moving on to the managing your flood of information. There's so many different elements within Google Analytics, it's really hard to touch upon all of them. Some of the core metrics that most people are interested in is how many people are coming to my site. And the most popular thing or the most commonly questioned item would be the bounce rate, and that the bounce rate is really, really high. But the other metric that we try and get clients to focus on is the average time on site, because that really dictates the interest behind your site. So the more time that they spend on your site, the more Google's going to kind of give you the nod of approval in the sense that, it's a site obviously marketed to their target demographic, because the thing that you want to be careful of is you don't want to build your site marketing to Google specifically, because Google's not going to hire you for those particular products or services that you provide. The idea really being is develop your online marketing strategy around whoever it is or whatever area it is that you're targeting. That's going to be your best approach with Google. And Google's actually taking steps to ensure that people are actually following that methodology or that protocol. People that are over-optimizing their sites with placing a whole bunch of keyword information in there are finding that they're kind of being recalibrated. So from the standpoint of, what you do with the site as far as optimizing it, just be mindful and always rely upon PhotoBiz to kind of guide you through that process. And in relation to that, we can provide you more information about how to read, those Google Analytic reports. So mainly what you're talking about is the content tracking for the actual site itself, the types of traffic sources, that are going to be coming from, those various areas outside of your website. And there are about 20 different metrics that you can use for video visitors. And again, this is talking about that primary audience. So who is it that you're reaching? And then the overall question of, okay, where do I look in order to obtain that information? And again, I recommend contacting us, and if you're comfortable with it, sharing your login information with us so we can kind of step you through that process. So let's talk a little bit about what Google Analytics means. So I had the privilege of being able to use Danny's site as an example to kind of give you all an indication of what the site actually looks like. So this is the control panel for Google Analytics. Again, this is kind of the reporting tool to talk about statistically what it is that's happening, on the actual website itself. The core aspect of what you're interested in is, of course, going to be that date range. So you're looking at what kind of activity has occurred on my website from, set period to set period. You can go in and change this criteria if you're interested in looking at, results from the past and how they compare, to the present day. And there's also some tools that you can use, like you can export information, via the various tools so that you have something that you can actually archive. And it's something that you don't necessarily have to go into the control panel, each time in order to obtain that information. You can actually create your own archive offline. And of course, the PDF can be viewed on, various types of devices, and that way you don't necessarily have to share your login information if you're talking about a team of people that are going to be looking at what you have. So again, these are some of the primary components that you have available to you. Again, I recommend allowing PhotoBiz to kind of walk you through, how some of these tools work and how to decipher or determine how effective they are for you. So under demographics, you're looking at, again, when I was talking about before, where am I making that impact? So you can see, right now from a high-level standpoint, Danny's most effective outreach is within the United States. But as you click further into it, you can actually see, again, from a state perspective, where within the U.S. am I making that impact. And of course, you can also see the number of visitors, at the state level. And then the thing that's helpful too is when you start talking about like that geographical region. So North Carolina is a pretty big area. So if you're talking about targeting or marketing yourself as a Greensboro, North Carolina race driver or photographer or what have you, you want to know, where or how effective it's been with your marketing efforts in reaching that target demographic. And so the time that you're looking at for that impact is basically outlined down here. So you know that you've had 15 visits, to the site from users somewhere in the Greensboro, North Carolina area. And the number of page visits is 1.07. I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think for most people they focus here on this number, which is the bounce rate. So if the bounce rate's pretty high, then they're usually concerned that, oh, people are dropping off of my site. And that is not necessarily true. I think the thing that most people need to focus on is the average duration of time on the actual website itself. And then, of course, you want to know during that period how many new visitors have you received on that site versus, the previous. And then, of course, you're going to see down here more specific information for those areas within, the Greensboro Triad area. So you can see that that includes Cary, Winston-Salem, Ocean Isle Beach, etc. I'm going to go down to technology. So again, this is talking about, what is it that people are using as the tool to reach your site. So again, this is, I think, integral to people determining, what are the popular browsers, because that's a common question that we get, in ensuring that you as our clients advise your customers to, keep their websites, their browsers updated, because it's going to affect their overall experience with your site. So that's first and foremost. And then secondly, you want them to, of course, take advantage of the newest and latest technology so that their online experience is optimal. There's not anything that's missing, or, there are pages that don't fully display because they're using an old or outdated version of their browser. And we have some tools that you can actually put in place to alert users when they're using a browser that may be outdated, and that, we recommend that they actually move to, a newer system, a newer browser, I'm sorry. You can also tell from this level, how far into that demographic are those users with their platforms or the hardware. So are they using a PC or a Mac? If that plays a role into your online marketing strategy, it's probably great information for you to know also. The network basically talks about who those internet providers are. If that's important to you, great, it's here. And again, this talks again about that wealth of information, that Google provides to you. So I wanted to go down here and talk a little bit about, the traffic. And this is really where, for most folks, the real interest is peaked. So they're usually interested in where it is that the traffic is actually coming from. The most important aspect, I think, of all search engine optimization efforts, at least initially, it should start out organically. So you're talking about using things that are open source. So your products, of course, are going to be the primary means in which you're going to promote your website or your business via the content as well as the metadata. And then, of course, utilizing any external resources that you have, Twitter, Facebook. A blog is highly, highly effective when it comes to search engine optimization. It's a main means of keeping your website relevant and putting that content out there in front of people. So again, these are the components that tell you exactly where, traffic is coming from related to your site. And these are basically going to show you the graphs, that are associated with, the information that's depicted down here. So you can kind of see where, you hit some of those peaks, but also some of those valleys. I think this is particularly effective. So when you're running campaigns or you're doing promotions or things like that, you can actually see, or you should see, a spike in the activity that happens, during those periods. And of course, when it's down season or maybe when you're not as busy, you're probably going to be reflected in, these valley areas, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's probably just, part of the natural element of the business itself, and it's just depicted here in the actual results. Okay, so I don't have the query set up, but this is something that I had referred to previously. So this allows you to pull in the information that you established within Google Webmaster Tools. So Danny doesn't have it set up on his, but we can actually help clients facilitate pulling that information from that the Google Webmaster Tools dashboard into your Google Analytics dashboard. So again, you're only having to log into one place one time in order to manage that information. Again, we talked about the geographical summary. Okay, so now you're talking about the actual activity that's happening by way of the site. So when you're looking at the number of pages that were here, they were 18 page views. The average time that people spent on the page was about 34 seconds, which is not necessarily a bad thing. The bounce rate is a little high, but like I said, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. The interesting or the most interesting aspect of what you have here is how many people have hit the page. And then, of course, you can move down into the drill down of those actual pages themselves. Now, this area is used for the metadata. So when you're talking about those keyword terms, this is where a lot of that can be reflected too. So, of course, you can set up your goals here for certain keyword terms, but I think that this is part of where most folks are going to devote their effort when you're talking about what kind of impact am I making, or how are people finding me? Are they using this particular keyword term in order to find me? And you'll find that through, this particular tool here. These others really relate more to even more advanced information, so I won't necessarily go into that much detail with those. Again, I highly recommend giving us a call so we can kind of talk you through some of the core fundamentals of how to determine how best to use or decipher the information that you have within the report set. And then, having that passionate support available, we can, of course, take you deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. Okay, so we kind of covered most of this. Again, we can cover some of the questions that we have, towards the end of the. Okay, so we talked a little bit about this too. I just wanted to show you more from the control panel standpoint, some of these key points. So again, we looked at location. So where specifically are those people or persons or potential customers and or clients coming from, whether that's you operating your business in the U.S. or that you're doing business abroad as well. You being able to look down deep into that target demographic to see where specifically people are coming from. And again, that's going to kind of play into your online marketing strategy, because you may find that you're actually hitting a market that you didn't know anything about. But that's within close proximity of where you're doing business. So again, when you're talking about adjusting, your online marketing strategy or your return on investment, be sure that you have an idea of where you're making that impact. So like I said, you can adjust the content of your site as well as the keywords accordingly. Again, we talked a little bit about how are they getting there. So you're talking about the referral traffic. So whether it's folks that are coming from Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or your blog, the analytics reports are going to show them, specifically how it is that they're getting to your website. Again, the keyword term tool is a great resource within the Google Analytics report set. I think that it's probably one of the most commonly used tool, because most people, if they're embarking upon SEO, the primary area in which they start is, well, I want to be known for being this type of service provider in this particular area. And so that's where that keyword aspect is going to come into play. The referral traffic, of course, are those sources, externally that are linking out to you. So if you have an opportunity to do like a guest blog post, always, always, always ask for an opportunity to have a link from that particular site where your post is going to be featured to your website. It's going to garner you, hopefully, a lot of traffic and a lot of interest, and you'll be able to see that by basically having that resource reflected in your report set as a referral from the location of where the actual blog was posted to your actual website. And again, we talked a little bit about what are they using to actually access your site. And again, this is very important. So for those that want to ensure that you're not limiting the number of people that may take advantage of whatever it is that you're providing within your business, just ensure that you have that overall accessibility component embedded within the site. So as long as you have a classic HTML mirror or an HTML5 for your portfolio sites, you're fine. You're always going to be covered from the biz site or the content site with the blog and the store component associated with it. That's HTML5 as well. So again, anybody from iPhones to Androids to iPads to Surface to Kindle users can all access the site. And essentially, I think from the marketing standpoint, they're all seeing, pretty much the same branded element that you're presenting to the world. So it's kind of consistent as far as how your branded is protected regardless of the type of device. AdWords are something that we're commonly asked about. In some instances, folks have already taken advantage of Google AdWords, perhaps because of advice that was extended to them by a previous search engine optimization firm or consultant. Again, our initial approach with Google AdWords is always to make your initial efforts with search engine optimization organic. I think establishing that initially will tell you, the success of not necessarily having to come out of your pocket for your online marketing. And then from there, of course, you can, add icing to the cake with, Google AdWords. It can facilitate, a quicker movement to the forefront, perhaps, of your peers that are not utilizing them. But I think in determining, what type of investment you're going to make within that Google AdWords arena is going to be dictated by some of these, particular pieces of criteria. So are you willing to negotiate or set a particular budget for a particular keyword to work to your best benefit or to your optimal benefit at a particular time of the day? So if you're talking about, moms that are basically surfing the net in the morning and you're trying to establish yourself as a newborn photographer, perhaps purchasing, a keyword for, the middle of the day or the early part of the day, may be worth the investment. And I think also the pay-per-click aspect of it is, again, that return on investment. So you should be able to see, based on what you're putting up with your Google AdWords budget, how well that is paying off for you. And then, like I said, you can adjust this accordingly. We don't make any recommendations as far as what type of budget you should start out with, because I think that ultimately that's a business decision. But again, what we do is promote organic first, and then of course you have Google AdWords, to take advantage of. And because it's another Google product, of course it's going to work to your benefit. The one thing that I think is great about the Google AdWords, which doesn't necessarily cost you money, is to basically look at the keyword tool. So again, if we go back from the standpoint of people doing the initial brainstorming about their SEO effort and how best to position themselves, you already know your line of business, that's clear. You already know the area in which you want to serve, that's clear. But I think the missing bogey may be, who is it that I'm actually going up against for that type of business? And how saturated is that market? Because I think that that really sets the tone for understanding how deep into the pool you're actually swimming and, what your overall success is going to be within that particular market. All businesses are not created equal, and each business is going to be utilizing its own means or methods of online promoting. So, it can be a bit daunting to compete with someone who's had, a web presence for, 30 years, and they're using all these social media platforms, and all you have is a website. But I think that you have to start somewhere. and the Google AdWords keyword tool is a valuable component because I think it helps you understand better about your business, those terms that you plan to utilize to associate with your business, and then how that has an overall effect, at least from the perspective of kind of doing the litmus test to determine, okay, based on the type of business that I offer and this type of website or solution, web solution that I have, I'm planning on using these keywords. Now, what does that actually look like from, a really global or large demographic scale as well as the local area? And for some that we've worked with, they've determined that I'm going to use this tool as a means of establishing a niche market. So in other words, if you're in New York City and there are billions and billions of photographers, let's say, for example, it may be that you may be able to establish more of a niche, which will help facilitate, getting you out there. Again, with the market being as saturated as it is for that particular line of work or service, trying to climb that ladder of, ultimately ending up on page one is going to be a culmination of a lot of different things. It's not just going to be your keywords, and it's not going to be just your content. So you'll have to keep that in mind. But again, this tool I think is a great resource for at least embarking upon where it is that you need to align your thinking and how well are those keyword terms that you're considering going to work for you. We talked a little bit about this before, and it's not so much that I'm promoting the PhotoBiz blog site or blog product that we have, but what I want to stress is the importance of the blog. And I think for most folks that are, starting with their overall SEO effort, or they're thinking about, okay, well, how do I need to approach this? I think the common misconception is, well, I've built a website and it has information in it. And so, you kind of take the hands off the wheel and allow the site to kind of navigate to Nirvana, which is page one. But again, it's a culmination of a lot of different things. Google's algorithm, takes into effect or takes into consideration a whole host or a whole wealth of criteria and information. The blog is probably the most commonly used tool to make that touch point with, that potential client and or customer, as well as those that you have in existence already. It's a means of actively promoting your business. So what you're doing by way of the blog is keeping your business relevant. A lot of people use Facebook like a blog, but the blog site in and of itself has opportunities for you to create links, so that you have referral traffic from your blog back to your website. But I would always say to clients, or I would always suggest to you that in considering utilizing a blog or considering the purchase of a blog is blogging is worth your time. I mean, it's worth the investment of creating, that intimate touch point with that prospective client or your existing client. If you think about your website is a push solution. You push information up onto it, and the only real interactive point, depending on upon what product you have, is maybe the contact page if you have like a portfolio site. So a blog does give them the opportunity to click on links similar to your website, but it also gives them an opportunity, to post comments. And so you can find that the time spent on your blog may be a bit more extensive, particularly if you're creating information or content that really keeps the user, affixed to whatever it is that you're offering. So if it's a promotion, or it's a campaign that you're running in order to find new senior models, I mean, that's a great blogging opportunity. If you wanted to talk about some of the things that would be associated, with a particular type of session and how people can prepare for that, again, that's all valuable information, as well as those things that maybe exist outside of your business but that are closely related or affiliated. So if you do wedding photography, maybe you know something or are associated with a really great florist, that's in your local area, that you have a link to their site because your site, basically serves as a referral or resource component, not just for photography, but also the things associated with the wedding. and then, of course, providing a link back to your website. That will work out for both of you, essentially. But I think the most important aspect here, too, is understand who it is that you're writing for and to. And I think, like I said, there are several different approaches that you can take with that. We have a great blog article that was written by one of my mentors, one of the team leads, Mike. I highly recommend going out to our blog and taking a look at that. It's a great synopsis of what it is that you should be thinking about or considering when you're blogging and how to make that effective. Because I think for most folks, that's one of the things that they struggle with is, well, I don't really have that much to say, and I'm not really sure that people would be that interested in what I have to say. But you're your best marketer, so I think you can allow the opportunities that you're engaged in, to promote yourself, and like I said, giving people an opportunity to talk a little bit about that. So I wanted to give Danny an opportunity to talk a little bit about some of those social media resources that play, again, an intricate role in that online marketing strategy, because again, SEO is a culmination of a lot of different things. So it's not just your website, it's not just the keywords, it's not just the metadata. Again, it's the means of how are you garnering or generating interest, not only about your business, but also getting traffic to your website, and what do those components look like. And so Danny's going to talk a little bit about social media for us and how these particular components can play as an advantage to you in your overall effort in addition to your website.
All right, everybody. I am going to just go over the multiple social media networks that we have listed here and just talk a little bit more about them and, kind of give you guys maybe a second opinion and a second way to look at what, how these are going to help out your SEO. So, your whole online presence and everything, like Jeff said, I really think it starts back with determining, do you know your brand? Because if you don't, then, definitely take a step back to that and have all your materials in play. They're going to help out across the board, especially on social media. So what I mean by that, do you have a certain font you're using? Do you have a logo? Do you have colors? Because then you can integrate them in Facebook, Google+, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You can integrate those into there and really get that professional uniform look across the board. So it's a little off topic, but still relative, and wanted to throw that out there. Definitely keep all of that in mind. So moving right along, let's talk about how Facebook can really help out your SEO. So a lot of people might not think that. They might not even think, what is social media going to do to help me out? But let's get back to what drives up your search engine optimization, and that's organic traffic. That's really the number one thing that will help out your search engine optimization. So on Facebook and on the other social media platforms that are out there, give them a reason to come visit you on social media. Whether you're hosting a contest, you've got a discount code that they can unlock, you're doing a promotion, a sale, you're posting tips for your brides, you're posting links to your blog, which is then tied back to your website. It all really ends up with getting them to that one website, driving that traffic in there. So Facebook has algorithm they call EdgeRank, which is kind of like Google's algorithm. So it is something that you definitely should research on. I recommend checking out a site called allfacebook.com. Again, it's just ALL, allfacebook.com. And it's just an unofficial fan page that covers Facebook in general, meaning they've got basically they're one step ahead of the news and will tell you, kind of rumors, things that are going on Facebook. When they change this EdgeRank, you can look up definitions of Facebook terms. It's really a great resource that I like to use. Then you can learn a little bit more about EdgeRank. Now, EdgeRank will also determine how your post is viewed, how long it is kind of viral, those different things. So you definitely can learn more about EdgeRank and what Facebook is looking for. Really a big trend that I've seen is statuses that contain photos are great. When you put a photo with a call to action inside of it, something like, like this photo and you tell them to do something, it usually will drive in more traffic. And as you guys have noticed with Facebook, it's kind of turning into a bit of more of a photo sharing site. There's less and less statuses. It's less about being connected, just people just kind of showing silly images on the internet. In my opinion, it's still a big power player. It's the largest social network. But keep in mind that there are other stuff out there. So a lot of people get really hung up on just Facebook. How this all ties in is your insights are how you're going to scale how well your edge rank is working in terms of, how well your posts are doing. So click on that insights. A lot of people overlook those, but they'll tell you about how well a post is doing, how viral it went, organic views that saw it. It'll show you, just really all those different things. You can learn more about the time of the day when your post was more successful versus other posts. You can see how many people viewed it, clicked on it, liked it, shared it, all that good stuff. So insights are a great tool to measure this. Now, as far as SEO goes, you can build up a great following on Facebook and then send them right off to your website. Whether you're sharing blog posts, whether you are, you have a discount product in your store, you're offering a coupon code and you tell them to use it in the store when they're ordering. It can really apply to all businesses. Photographers, I've seen a lot of photographers where they will share a status with a link to the blog. Again, there are multiple blog platforms out there. We're a big fan and advocate of our own personal blog. We obviously support it, and it has built-in social media functionality, which is great. So you can literally just create the post and click a Facebook button and share it on your wall directly there. So that's going to drive people from that Facebook back to your blog, which is tied into your website. And what does that do? That's more traffic over to your site. So Google picks up on that traffic, and that really helps out. There's a lot of different things you can do in terms of Facebook that are non-related to getting people off of the Facebook to your site, and we're not going to really cover those today. I actually will have a webinar on social media that will be a more advanced social media webinar coming up next month, so I'm excited for that, and you guys can definitely register and join me in that webinar. Now, Google Plus is a big tool that a lot of people don't take advantage of. Understandably, it feels like it's kind of like a Wild West scene where there's just that big table rolling around. I mean, if you're involved in it, that's great. I do like Google Plus. I can see myself using it more. It's less cluttered, and also it works with your Google Places, which ties back into your analytics account and just your Google presence overall. It does allow you to connect with your industry and other people in the industry. There are different hangouts you can join as well, which are really cool. And if you've never experienced a hangout, I'd recommend checking it out. They really have kind of perfected this video hangout where you can have like multiple people inside of a video chat, and there could be like one main person talking, and then you can or connect with other people. They're really fun, and they're definitely cool. I've seen a lot of businesses taking advantage of these now, actually over the past year and a half, and an example of just something that helped somebody go viral. I heard a story of a recording artist who was not that large yet, but she made a Google Hangout, and she literally, her big break was that she was making Google Hangouts and playing song requests for people, video and song, and people would join in, and it was like live. So that was really cool. Hangouts for photographers and small businesses, obviously it doesn't really apply to it, but it's a good place more so just to connect with other people. And if you're doing something that you would want to present to a large audience at once, maybe having a scheduled hangout would be really cool for them, and that way it's using new technology, it's easier, you really feel more connected with the video and audio presence right there rather than just having like a chat room. So Google Plus, again, you can drive a lot of traffic there, and it's tied into your Google Places account, which is great, and there is definitely a market of people on there that will visit your site through Google Plus as well. Now, Twitter is another great tool, and I recommend, once you're on Twitter, going and getting some kind of a URL shortener that you can use to shorten your website URL. Now, as far as what would how's Twitter going to help me out? I mean, Twitter, in my opinion, you're going to hit a larger variety and big amount of followers on there potentially because you can use those hashtags. And if when you're hashtagging stuff, like say you do senior portraits, or wedding photography, for example, you can type in, just shot a beautiful hashtag bridal session, and this couple is super excited for their up-and-coming September hashtag wedding. So then what did I do? I threw in 2 hashtags, and now anyone who clicks on that hashtag, or anyone on the web out there who's looking for bridal or wedding, they're now going to find your tweet. Now, obviously, there's thousands of tweets that get pushed out every minute, and I mean, it's crazy. It's going. The stream is constantly moving, but the fact that you're putting it out there is great. It connects you with those people who are interested in that hashtag. You can then, at the end of your post, you can paste a link to your website with a URL shortener. So, for example, Google has one. There's probably Bitly. You guys may have heard of. Bitly's super popular. You can buy through Bitly. You can get one that's actually based on your domain name. So we have one that's like phto.biz. We have like photo.biz. It's a shorter one. And then any kind of link we'll create, it'll be the short link / a few characters. Nice and short. And also the great thing about using a URL shortener on Facebook or Twitter is that the URL shortener, like Bitly, offers analytics. So you can see how many people are clicking on your link, which is great. So I do recommend using something like that on Twitter as well. Now, if you can come up with a hashtag for your brand or business, I've seen a lot of people do that as well. A lot of companies do that, and that will drive, again, more trending traffic. And that's really the biggest thing. Social media, for me, obviously you can meet new clients on there, you can connect with old ones, and you can drive a lot of traffic to your site. I mean, for me, a success story of social media is if you even get someone to get to your site from there. Getting them to go to your site and then clicking contact and eventually booking them is the best. That's awesome. That would be ideal. But just getting that traffic over to your site, well, at least they're then getting exposed to your work. They're getting exposed to what you offer. They can contact you. And again, they're giving you a hit on your site, which will help out with your search engine rank. So that's really, a big goal of social media, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump into my new favorite social media, which is Instagram. And many of you guys attending here, I'm sure, if I could get a show of hands, obviously we can't, are probably using Instagram on your smartphone or have at least heard of it. If you have children that have a smartphone, they're probably on Instagram. It is one of the fastest growing social networks out there. Obviously very image focused. Again, it uses hashtags, and you cannot use links on it. So you're probably wondering, well, what can I do? You still can manually type out your domain name, but as far as Instagram goes, what I would say as far as gaining traffic off of it is more so really, again, getting that unique organic traffic to come off of Instagram via the hashtags. Again, you'll be using things like photo of the day, or you can really hashtag any of those different words that are going to be inside of your post, and that'll help people who are searching for that find your post. And again, if you can get something that's trending, get a lot of likes on it, you could potentially be featured on their daily featured photo, and then you'll get thousands of hits on it, which would be awesome. So share your work on there. Show your awesome cell phone photography if you're into it, or just take your photos off your real camera and put them on your phone, and then Instagram them. But we really are enjoying Instagram for PhotoBiz's social media presence. It's nice to be able to connect with people on there, to share kind of a little bit of a behind-the-scenes thing. Instagram is nice too if you're a photographer. Even if you're working solo, try and take a photo of your camera on a tripod and your subject in front of it, or give them a little sneak peek, something behind the scenes. Let them a little bit more into the back end of your business, which is kind of cool. And then at the end of the day, again, really the ultimate goal is trying to drive them to that website. So I would recommend checking out Instagram and hopping on it if you can. The next social media platform that we were talking about is going to be Pinterest. Now, there's probably a couple of obsessed pinners in this webinar today. I'm sure someone would admit to it if we were in person. But, it obviously is a bulletin board inspired social network. You have boards and you can pin things on it, whether it's, inspiration, ideas, your work, portfolio. It's a great place to really show different things off and obviously learn and come up with, great ideas and inspiration from it. So again, inside of your profile, you can then have the link to your site, which if you do get an error about verifying your site from Pinterest, you can verify your PhotoBiz site, and any of the support team members here can help you out with that. It's very simple, just involves copying their code into your visit counter and updating your site, and it'll update. Now, what would I want to post on Pinterest? We have a couple examples of things we do here. We show our different designs off. We show some inspiration off. We talk about tours and conferences that we'll be attending. Now, this is a great place for really any photographer. A lot of people already have their own personal Pinterest board, but creating one for your business wouldn't hurt and be a bad idea for that, because potentially your work could get repinned by someone, and then someone else could repin it, and it would go potentially viral. More people would visit your site to check out the rest of your work. It would then drive up clicks to your website, which would again drive up that search engine optimization. So obviously, I sound like I'm probably beating a dead horse here, but really the goal of each one of these platforms is to get more traffic to your website. And today, obviously I want to show you different things that you'll put on those social networks that will get people over to your website, or at least get them on your social network and interested in your stuff. Now, YouTube is obviously the most popular video sharing social network that's out there. It has great potential for really any small business, in my opinion, and I wish a lot more businesses would do this. For me and for your clients, I mean, imagine how great is it if they can come to your YouTube channel and meet you, through a video. They can see samples of your work. Maybe your slideshows are hosted there. Most of the seniors, if you're doing seniors, are going to be on YouTube, have their own account, and you can make a video with their name right there in it. It's a like an Animoto video or a slideshow. Then they can let their friends leave comments on it, and inside of the description of the video, you've got a link going back to your website. So again, they're going back and checking it out. You always want to include stuff like, for more examples of my work, view my site at www.photobiz.com, things like that. If you like this, please be sure to check out this and have the link to my website. And on YouTube, again, if you don't know about YouTube or how you would use it as a business, you can go in and create a channel for your business. You can brand it and customize the background image and your logo. You can show off a featured video. You can definitely drive traffic over to your website. And you can opt into running ads on your most popular videos, which could potentially you could monetize off of that, depending on how many videos you have, how many views you have on your video. Now, YouTube to me is really nice. Again, showing off slideshows and an about video. It kind of gives you, gives your clients a little perk. Like, just think of these little things that you're doing that set you above the other guy and other gal out there. Like, what can you do to get that competitive advantage? And these are free platforms that really help your business, in my opinion, look a bit more professional. It opens up more doors for people to connect with you, and also, again, the other way around, opens up doors for you to connect with the people who are viewing your social media different presences. So I definitely want you guys to check out at least some of these if you're not already on them, and get involved in it, because they can ultimately help increase your search engine optimization by people visiting your site, by being driven from that. I'll be honest, a lot of my my first example or touch I have with a business, I could be browsing Facebook, and they have that new graph search feature out, which is a much more advanced search, and I'll type that into my Facebook. I'll type in a business I'm interested in. So I want to go and I want to look at their Facebook page. I mean, I kind of judge a little bit about a business before I even get to know them on how their Facebook is. What kind of post are they doing? Are they not ever updating it? Do they even have a fan page? Obviously, I don't take that to heart for every business, but it's at least usually a good indicator of the kind of service you're going to get from that business. So that it does take a commitment on your part, but hey, I mean, if this is your career or your business, you want to be committed to it, and that's what we're here to help you by providing tools for your website that make it easier to run your business. So again, just a little bit about some of the terms I used. If things are going trending or viral, those are great things that you want to happen to your post or your account on Twitter or tweet or your Instagram photo. Really, getting either one of those things to happen would be awesome. They really do provide a big boost to your traffic and ranking, and a big thing about it is that it all ties back into your website and your web presence. And getting people over to your site and having them click that contact button is really our end goal. And that's what's the most exciting thing about social media for me. The things that are even more exciting about it are some of the fun things you can offer your clients or do on social media that you may not have been able to do in the past, and that's reach such a broad market for free. And there's a lot of different ideas and tools that you can do on social media that, like I said, I want to talk about in my future webinar. So if you're interested in that, check it out. I'll be going over things like running a contest on Facebook, searching for hashtags to look for clients on Twitter, talking about Instagram contests and things of that nature. So I'm excited for that. But that kind of covers a little bit about social media and, again, how it can be used to increase your search engine optimization. So at this point, we are going to jump into our question and answer session with mainly Jeff, and I will be here in case you have any questions that are regarding your social media. So we're ready for your questions, everybody. Just go ahead and chat them to us, and we will answer them in the order they come in. Also, we do see that there were a few questions that came in earlier, and we are reviewing them right now, so we're going to do our best to get over to you guys. All right, so the first question comes in from Lisa about sitemaps. And so, Lisa, you wanted to know, where do you find your sitemap, and where does it become resubmitted? Is it done on PhotoBiz or on Google? So I am going to hand the mic over to Jeff. Let him answer that for you.
Lisa, there's a couple of different ways that this can be handled. The system, particularly the newer products, and our biz site in particular, provide the ability for your sitemap to be submitted. It's never a bad idea to use a Google vehicle to communicate directly with them, because then you have assurances, and not that utilizing a PhotoBiz means of submitting that sitemap to them would be questioned or questionable, but I think that direct line of contact using their tool is highly recommended. I think it's a common practice that anyone who's engaged or is signed up with Google Webmaster Tools should use. We can help you with the process of submitting that sitemap. Essentially, when you submit the sitemap, it's yourdomainname.com/sitemap.cfm or Charlie Frank Mary. And then there's a process for you to submit the sitemap. Once you've submitted the sitemap, the process of resubmitting the sitemap is fairly easy. You just have to click into the sitemap.cfm, and then it will bring up a page where you can actually click on, resubmit for your sitemap. And again, you're going to do that more in the case of when you've made a change to your metadata, whether it's the content or your keywords or both, or there's a particular aspect of your business that's changed significantly, whether that's a product or service that you no longer are engaged in or something new that you're promoting. We have another question from Benny, which is, based on what we usually see, what is considered a good versus not so good average visit duration? It really depends. I mean, if you can get someone to spend close to a minute on your site, I mean, that's always a good indicator, I think. Again, it's probably going to be related to, how relevant the information or content within the site is to them. And that's, again, where I think blogs are really effective, because, you kind of have them as a captive audience, and then you kind of place a little bit of that teaser in the blog post itself, see more, to see more extensive examples of my portfolio, click here, and that takes them over to the website. That's particularly effective with fine art photographers, but I've also seen it with a lot of the senior photographers too, in weddings, and even product providers. I think, like I said, it's hard to say, but I think anything even remotely close to a minute, I think, is always a good indication. And of course, you're going to be looking at that over time. So as you adjust your efforts, that's probably going to dictate, more and more effectiveness and kind of tweaking, again, your online marketing strategy. So one of the questions that we have from Tanya is, how many keywords should I use to get the best results for your site? Our adage of any of the SEO experts and consultants that you speak with would be, or at least my mantra is, less is more. So, you're not talking about any more than, 6 to 8 keywords, particularly if you're using them on a specific page, because the idea really is you're not trying to inundate Google with a bunch of information. Again, the adage with that is Google's never going to hire you as, a photographer or a service or business provider, or perhaps it could happen. But the idea really is that you're trying to market to a particular demographic, and where you get the nod from Google is you're actually doing that. And like I said, Google's actually going through the process, by way of some of the algorithm updates, which I won't really get into any detail about. But, folks that are over-optimizing their site, could face, some penalties. And it's not necessarily a monetary penalty as much as it is you may see your site drop off as far as, where you sit within the search results. So it is a fine balance. Again, I would say anywhere from, 6 to 8, keywords per page is probably ideal. Less is more. You don't necessarily have to reiterate the same type of keywords, on every single page. And you do want to be specific to the page. And that's an oversight or a mistake that we see commonly with clients that are attempting to optimize their website, which is there's the main portion, within like the portfolio sites where you can add, your metadata in addition to like a splash intro page. But you also have the individual pages, which I think is a great tool within a template-based system, because for most, people want to get into the actual HTML code in order to embed their metadata within that. But it's actually, I think, more conducive to you having something that you can actually manage, much like the rest of the control panel. So again, on the individual pages, you have SEO opportunities. The thing to keep in mind with those individual pages, again, is to make the metadata relevant to that page. So you don't want to reference anything about seniors on a newborns page and vice versa. So what you're trying to do is establish metadata, particularly on those gallery pages, because if you can imagine, the search engines don't see those images with eyes. They're really trying to garner from what is on that page what it is that should be communicated back to the general public. And when you're looking at search results, there's always a description there. So if you talk a little bit about or frame the context of those images, then you are actually giving a glimpse of what it is that you want people to actually glean from, that particular link that's listed as a result. So again, less is more, 6, 8 keywords, probably ideal. Let's see what other questions we have. So I wanted to respond to Joe's question of how much importance is having wedding in your domain name for SEO. Well, I think the natural, or the obvious, I should say, is if you're using something like Orlando Wedding Photographer and that's part of what you want to be found under, obviously, that's probably, a corner market that someone took advantage of, many, many moons ago. So can it help you? Yes. But I think it's really more from the standpoint of if you're using that domain name as part of, what you're promoting your business as. I have seen where those businesses kind of do appear, at the top of the search results. It would be hard for me to say, however, if that was strictly based on their domain name being part of it or if they had additional efforts associated with that. And I would probably say it's a combination of both. So could you have a domain name that also talks about the type of business that you have? Yes. Could that benefit you? Yes. Ultimately, is it going to get you, to page 1 or not? It would be hard to say, but I think, like I said, just from a realistic standpoint, if you're using your domain name as part of the inclusion of your business and that target demographic, then yeah, it will definitely work to your benefit. One of the questions that we got from Alex, hi Alex, is do keywords on the page itself for SEO let's see, do I need to have keywords on the page itself for SEO, or will the keyword section do it? I believe what you're asking is this. There are some products that we have where the content on a particular page can actually generate auto SEO. And so in some cases, at least for the initial approach for some clients or customers, that may not necessarily be a bad place to start. But I think also is, taking advantage of, sort of the mentoring. It's one of the great things I think about the SEO service is that not only is it providing an opportunity for us to create the metadata for your site and teach you how to use some of the tools that I talked about, as well as the ones that Danny shared, strategically and optimally. But I think the other thing is also kind of framing the context of how to determine what keywords are best, but more importantly how to maintain that, so that when PhotoBiz actually takes its hand off the wheel, you still understand the direction in which you're heading and how best to stay on course. Because the landscape of SEO continues to change, and we work diligently to stay on the cutting edge or the cusp of what we see coming down the pike. We're part of many different forums that keep us advised of some of the things that are on the horizon. It's difficult to tell how the fallout will from those changes will be as far as how they impact PhotoBiz, because they don't necessarily give you an opportunity to kind of beta those changes, but we do take an approach that we actively research some of those things. So again, I think the approach can be for those that are basically starting out with their SEO effort and they're not necessarily sure what keyword information they should have. If it's an information page, allow the system to generate that for you. But I think if you want to go in more detail, just give us a call. We can kind of step you through the process of what it is that you need to consider. But I think the information pages in and of themselves kind of set the tone for that. So it's a great tool. I've seen it work to some folks' benefit, but I think also in people understanding what the auto SEO does, they want to take advantage of the custom as well. So I highly recommend doing that. You have more control over what it is that you want to provide if the system doesn't necessarily capture or convey what it is that you want to put forth. Tanya asked a question about the use of the service and our mentoring just by the way of, our general support. I highly recommend the service. Again, I'm not trying to come off as a salesman. I just know that based on my own experience, with some of the facilitation of those project efforts, but more importantly, seeing the outcome of what happens by way of those projects, is it really does take the pressure off of clients, because, and you can literally hear the sigh of relief over the line, because I think that SEO is really kind of overwhelming for most folks. As Danny talked about, all those different social media platforms and all the different reporting tools and all the things that you should be doing as far as keywords and metadata and content and blogging, and it's dizzying, really. And again, you're trying to hit the mark of what Google deems ideal and a fine balance, and not too much and not too little. So I think from the perspective of the service, the two core fundamentals of what I think it provides, which I think come at a very great value when you look at the market average, it's usually somewhere between $1,500 and $1,800. And they typically want you to use either their platform or they want you to utilize Google AdWords, which again is a business decision. But I think the approach that we take not only is to get you acquainted with what it is that we're planning to do, in the sense that we basically either utilize the metadata that you have currently and revise it, or we actually create new metadata for you. In addition to that, we also educate and mentor you. And that, to me, is the most critical aspect about SEO. It's not enough just to create metadata and sort of take your hands away from the aspect of what it means to manage that. And what I'm talking about there is I'm not talking about just understanding the keywords necessarily, but how that kind of plays out through the report structure in Google Analytics. Because I think, again, it kind of ties back to what is it that I need to adjust within my site. So what's working for me by way of that report structure, and then based on those variables, how do I need to adjust my site accordingly? And I think it's also a good indicator to tell you, where some of the interest is on your site. So you may find that there is some content within the site that are not necessarily that relevant. In other words, you don't really get any traffic on it, but you are garnering more traffic on some other areas. And so maybe you want to focus more of your marketing efforts in the way of content or information in those areas where you're making a significant impact.
All right, everybody. Well, we had a ton of questions come in there, but unfortunately we're out of time right now. So if you do have any additional questions, you can certainly pick up the phone anytime you're available, and you can give the Passionate Support team a call. And we'll do our best to help you out with any kind of questions regarding your SEO. And if you're interested in the service, definitely call in, mention that you heard about it in the webinar, and we'll be able to guide you in the direction for the service. Again, this webinar is going to be on our YouTube channel, so definitely subscribe there. We've got a lot of great information and free webinars that are out there that are very useful for your business. So again, I wanted to thank Jeff for putting together a great presentation, and also just wanted to thank everybody who joined us today for taking the time to join us at kind of an odd hour, but we hope that you gained a lot of useful information out of today's webinar. All right, everybody, thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode of PhotoBiz Live. Have a great day.